if you were listening to that first reading, Paul and Barnabas are returning home after a long trip of evangelization. They've gone from city to city. They've had some success. They've got a few beatings. They've been kicked out of some towns. They had some success, and they had some real rough times too. And so they're returning to some of the same towns. If you were reading earlier, you would say, my gosh, they're going back to Iconium? Weren't they stoned and thrown out of town there? They went back and they strengthened the community that was believing in Jesus. So they gave them said, look, we're with you. We're not going to be with you in person because we're going back to Antioch, but we're with you in Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. Now, what does that have to do with First Communion? Well, why do we receive Christ? We receive Christ so that we might be like Christ. And one of the things that Jesus was like is he was always telling people about God. But he wasn't just telling them about God, he was being God to them. Because we believe he was the Son of God. And what that means is, from the gospel today, is that he was loving as God. So what does he say on the last night before he died? He says, one commandment I give to all of us, not just the First Communion, love one another as I have loved you. The proof that we have really understood and received the Eucharist, communion, First Communion, the proof will be is whether we love. It won't be whether we, as pretty, as beautiful as you guys are today, you are beautiful and well-dressed, ties. It won't be the outside, it'll be whether you love your parents better. And the proof of whether they understand what the Eucharist is whether they love you better. But then it won't stop there, right? We have family and friends sitting right here. But it'll be whether these families here love those families there. And those families there love these families here. You don't even know each other, do you? You know anyone over there? Not a soul, okay. You know anyone? Oh, look, there we go. There's part of them. So you know somebody. You gotta love them. And you gotta love them. But then you gotta love the people behind you too. And you guys over there and over there are not off the hook. If you receive communion, what's the point? The point is that God gives us daily bread so that we can love the stranger in front of us and behind us. But it's not just Catholics you gotta go out on the street on Route 7, and you go out to breakfast today, and you've got to bring that love with you, incarnate. That is by the way you behave. And see, that's the way Paul and Barnabas, what did they bring? They didn't just bring the story about Jesus. They brought Jesus by the way they behaved, by the way they loved. And what was convincing was the way they loved. And then they would listen to, they would say, well, why do these people love like this? Well, it's because of Jesus. And they have Jesus in their heart. So you remember when they got back to Antioch, they didn't say, boy, Paul and Barnabas, have you done a good job? Well, they had done a good job. They'd done a great job. But they said, give praise to God, because who accomplished the work? God accomplished it. He accomplished it through Paul and Barnabas. That's what we want from you. Now you might say, well, I'm pretty young for this job. Maybe so. But you can make the difference. And some of us might say, well, I'm pretty old for this job, right? I've done my thing. I'm retired. You can't claim you're too young or you're too retired. It is for all of us the role. Now, the truth be told, there won't always be life won't always be good. Now, probably some of you already know that, even though you're young. You know that you lose people, people disappoint you, sometimes they're bullies, sometimes, life is filled with some really sad things as well as some joyful things. And that's where we remember the second reading. It says that God, working through us, working through the community, working through the people who actually live what they receive in the Eucharist, that is, they become Jesus for others, then He will overwhelm and wipe every tear from every eye. So there's nothing there. That's why, if you read the story of Paul and Barnabas, you say, gee, how did they have the strength? If someone beat you and left you for dead, you would say to yourself, that's it. Right? Or I think to myself, I said, they would only have to beat me up and leave me for dead once. And I would say to myself, I don't know if I'm coming back for this. But it wasn't them. It was God working through it. Just like Jesus. He said, glorified in Him. And I glorified in you. But not simply glorified in you, but glorified in you, and you, and you. So when you receive your first communion today, we receive it too. Let us all live the love of God. Okay? That's the way they'll know that your first communion, or your 1,000th communion, or your 10,000th communion has meant something. That you live the life of Christ. And God gives you the grace to do it. Okay, so we're with you. Let's stand now.